Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my business little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I have a fun project coming up. It's a project that I think you can find debates on this across the internet, on Facebook, and different leather workers forums. I think it's a topic that creates a lot of questions for suppliers in the stores. And we're going to talk about it today, and I'm going to do an in-depth test. Now, I'm wearing my Montana Leather shirt today. If you were watching a couple of weeks ago, Montana Leather sent me 2 hides of leather that I'm going to be using in today's video. They sent it to me free of charge. They had been watching a live stream earlier on in the year where the question really was really got into talking about the differences in different vegetable tan leathers. Herman Oak, we'll call them imports, or more economy grades of leather. And the question was, how do they tool potentially different from one to the next? So Pat at Montana Leather reached out to me and said, I'll give you the hides. So he sent me a hide of the MTL, which is their brand name leather, VegTan, and a 8-9 ounce. And he also sent me a Herman Oak tooling leather in an 8-9 as well. So I have a side of each. So what I've done is I've cut panels out here, and we're going to tool those. So I've actually got 4 panels all together. We're going to do, because there's some ways I think, depending on like burnishing and such, that you can maybe highlight texture with antiques and maybe negate some of the differences in how they tool. So anyway, I've got 4 panels. I'm going to create the basket weave pattern. You've seen me do that before. I thought I would use that because it's easy enough for me to replicate 4 of these panels and have them be exactly the same. These will be journal covers when I'm done. This video will probably just be the tooling, because that's what we're talking about in this video, is tooling. So 2 of the panels are going to be just an oil and then a clear finish on them. I'll probably end up using the, it's a leather dressing from Duff's as the finish. So it'll be tooled, oiled, and then Duff's, and then 2 of those other 2 are going to have, they'll be oiled. I'll use tan coat as a resist. Then I'll put the Phoebe's antique paste on there, probably use black. Just it kind of goes in with some of my inventory I'm building. So I'll probably use black. I'll do both the same. And I'm going to be very precise in treating each of the panels the same through the whole process. And I'll talk more about that as we go. So I know that's kind of a long ramp up, but I do appreciate Montana Leather basically sponsoring today's video with the leather. So let's get over here on the workbench and we'll get started. I do appreciate you taking time to be within the shop today. I see a lot of conversation on taping the backs of the leather, using packing tape, don't use packing tape, use masking tape, don't use masking tape. I'm going to use the packing tape. I have a few reasons why I like that, but the packing tape is what I've been using, and that's what I'll be using on this project as well. So I'm going to start by putting packing tape on the backs of both of these. I'll trim up these edges here, and then I'll be over here on the workbench. I'm just using a squirt bottle here. And work moisture into here. The back is sealed with the tape. I set my calipers to 1/2 inch. Sorry, I said I'm not going to go into big detail on here, but it's hard for me not to feel like I need to fill dead air. So once I create this border on here, I typically come together to a point here, but I'm going to do rounded on these. I want to see how that looks different, because I end up rounding that outside corner, and I just think visually it'd be more pleasing to have this cut border rounded as well. So I'll start with my rounded corner. So when I lay my ruler on there, I know where to start and stop. I don't want to overcut this. So I'm going to go ahead and do the border here. I'm going to start and lay out the pattern for the tooling, and I'll come back when I get into tooling it so we can talk a little bit about how it, my impression on how it cut, if it cut differently. So I'm actually going to get the MTL leather going as well, and I'll bring them together so that I'm able to, on the fly, decide if it cuts better, tools better, that type of thing. So I'll be right back here in a minute. Okay, I'm cutting here this grid in. I do it on a diagonal. I think that looks the best on the cover. I think if you were to do it straight with it, that it would be annoying having a different pattern on the two ends, but I think that gets masked by setting it at an angle. In other words, if you went across here and they were all perfect until you got down to the last one and it was half the size, that would be annoying. You could try to measure and go from the middle, which would be the way to do it if you were trying to do it that direction. But I feel like the angle, I like how the result is at the end, how it looks. And I also think that it just, I think it's just more pleasing to see it that direction as well. So I'm going to finish cutting the pattern on both of these. When I get ready to start doing the tooling, then I will come back. When I start, I always start with what I would call my starting block out here in the middle somewhere. And then off of that, I create the whole pattern. So normally I'll do the complete deal. You can see I got a fingerprint on here. I'm not sure where I picked that up. It's probably me. But let me go ahead and hop on here. This is a vertical lined thumbprint. And the way I use that is in a random pattern. I will hit those like that, basket material. It's got a nice burnish, I'll say that. Let me flip it around, I'll show you what that's going to look like. Random. It's hard to create random. So let me, I'll work on this and I'll get this finished up, and then I'll come back once I have the basket weave tooled on both of those. And I'm gonna see if I can clean that. A lot of times if I pick up some, I have to be careful when I'm working on knife sharpening and things, because you pick up some grit of the metal, and then if you touch it there, it'll stain it. If that's the case, it should clean off with a little bit of lemon juice. All right, so I've started doing my decorative cuts. I finished the tooling, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my control on that. And what I mean by that is I try to make sure that I treat both pieces of leather exactly the same. In fact, when I was tooling on them, I did all the exterior cuts, I did all the pattern cut on the middle, I did both of them. I'd do one and then I would do the other, and then I'd switch to the other one and then to this one. And when I would wet one of these, even though I wasn't working the other one, I wet it the same amount. I really tried hard to keep everything the same, because, you know, I'm sure you would agree that casing is important. The amount of casing and how it's cased are important. So I did them the exact same way, even down to when I had it. Oh, see, I drug it that way. Got to try to keep these straight. Even when I had completely finished one, when I got the last one through the last phase, I kept adding moisture at the same interval that I did on the second one. I can't even remember now which one I finished last. Oh, I guess it was the MTL Leather was the last one. So they both have essentially the same amount of moisture. Now, I said essentially the same. I will say that it seemed like the MTL wanted to dry out maybe a little bit faster. I don't know if that's my imagination or not. But what I did was, instead of adding moisture, you know, earlier when I added moisture at the same interval. And what I mean by that is, and so I'm probably picking this apart, right? But I think when you do a control test and you're wanting to really see, I think that's important to do that. So now I forgot where I was going with that. But anyway, I kept it, you know, exactly the same. So what I would do is I would add moisture when I had like a quarter of this tooled. So I would do, like on these, I would tool all of them on this side, and I'd add moisture to the other one, and then I would continue on there. So I'm kind of dragging it out. So that's the recap of the tooling. I don't think that the actual tooling felt any different. I think that, I know there's gonna be people say they don't believe that, but I think they tooled essentially the same. It required, and what I mean by that, it required the same amount of force. And I can see some difference in the burnish between them, but I think the difference in the burnish is essentially the difference of the original color. Because if you remember, the Herman Oak had already some golden tones to it, whereas the Montana leather didn't have that same thing. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up there for this, and I'll come back in 24 hours when I'm ready to apply the oil. And I'm not gonna use everybody's favorite oil probably. I hear lots of people say they don't like the Neat's Foot oil, but that's the oil that I've been using. And I've got some other oils to test, but I didn't want to bring another variable into the equation of an oil that I hadn't been using. So we'll be using the Phoebe's Neat's Foot oil. All right, so I'll be back here in 24 hours. So I finished the tooling yesterday. Let it dry. It's not been 24 hours, but it's been about 20 hours since I last added moisture to this. I finished my decorative cuts on both of them. as you would expect, the leather, the Herman Oak, started off with that golden brown color to begin with, so it's maintained that same differential. The tooling itself, I don't think, I know I didn't strike harder on the MTL, so to me the tooling was very similar. I did mention, I'm sure I didn't edit it out. Sometimes I end up editing it out. The only thing I could tell difference between the two of them I was tooling is where your hand's resting on the leather. It felt different than the other. It felt, I don't know, softer maybe than the MTL. So let's go here. We're going to oil this. And I've got some oils I want to try to do a few different things, but I'm not going to make any variation in my typical oiling or oil process that I go through on this. So I'll be using the Phoebe's Neat's Foot oil. It's just what I have a bunch of. I bought a gallon of that when I first bought it. So I'm about through that. And we're going to be doing some tests later, but that's a different video on comparing different oils. And yeah, so I'll get over here on the workbench, we'll oil these, and then I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to let it sit probably for 24 hours until tomorrow morning, and then I'll come back in here and we'll take a look at how it looks there. And also, I'll just be using the clear finish on here. The other two, I'm going to go ahead and oil them. I'm not going to show you what oil on all of those, but I'm going to oil those, and tomorrow I'll put a resist on those, and then the following day I'm going to give it plenty of time so that there's not a a potential difference in how it will react if you are on it too early. But we'll be doing antiquing, and so anyway, let's hop over here on the workbench, get these oiled up. Okay, add a little oil here to my tub that I work from. I just got a piece of lambskin that I'm going to use here. The one thing I would say about oiling tooled leather, Don Gonzalez talks a lot about it, to try to get the oil on even, but put it on light the first time across. You can always add a little bit more oil to it, but when you set that down, if you really saturate one spot, it's dark, you're going to be oiling everything else up to that level. So I'm going to actually tap here a little bit on that cardboard before I start, and I'm just trying to lightly brush it across the top here until I get the oil kind of on even. Then a little more pressure here. And I've said it before, I don't think we need to worry too much about getting rid of every streak when you're putting oil on. Obviously, if you've got a big heavy spot, you're going to have to work on that. But my experience is that a little bit of streakiness soaks in, over time, meaning over the next few hours as it equalizes in there. The leather's really essentially a sponge, and it equals out quite a bit over time with the oiling. That's my experience anyway. And typically it ends up drying lighter as the oil soaks in. And I am, the oiling part here in this video is probably going to be a little bit long because I don't want to make it look like I've, done something different oil here. So I'm staying kind of in a live stream here. just like I did when I was using water on it. Tried to replicate the same amount of moisture, and I'm trying to replicate what I just did on the other one. When I'm done oiling these two, I'm going to oil the other two, the ones I'm going to antique. No sense in watching that part of it. A little boring doing both. And I noticed there was a little spot on the hide there, and I went ahead and left it in there. I was kind of curious to see if it, this oil is highlighting it a little bit. You could see it a little bit more when you had water on it. So we'll see how that goes. It might be a candidate to swap out and use the other one and use this one where I'm antiquing it, because obviously the antique would help to hide some of that. And I have had some, when I'm making them for inventory, it's easier to do. If you're making one for someone, you're trying to reach a specific color that they've asked for, it's harder to do that. But I have used antique. If I had, I don't know, one time I was reusing gloves, and I ended up with a couple fingerprints on there that I didn't notice until I got the resist on there. And I was using the tan coat as the finish. I called it a resist, but it was as the finish. But I went ahead and antiqued that one and just made another one. It helped to hide that spot. So let's see here. Once again, you can see the differential in it. A little bit of north light here in this window. But I think I'm happy with it. And I expect to see this continue to different colors on here. And let's let this soak in for 24 hours, and then we'll come back at the end of that and look at putting the finish on here. And then we'll see what kind of different color we have. So I'll be back tomorrow. All right, as you can see, I have all 4 panels tooled at this point and oiled, and have waited, let me think about this, I guess about 16 hours since it was oiled. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I'm going to look at these two because 2 of them are going to be antique paste. I just want to make sure if there's anything that I need to maybe hide, if there's any marks on here, because the antiquing helps in that area. I think I'm going to use these 2 here antiqued. So what I need to do is I need to set up and put a resist on here. And on the resist, I'm going to be using tan coat. And that's a product that Ian from Phoebe's told me works good for a resist as well. When I get rid of some of the inventory of that I have, I'll probably get some Pro Resist and see how that compares. Maybe that'll be a good comparison as well. All right, so let me get the materials out and we'll start off there. The one thing that, and I wonder if Pro Resist does it, but this tan coat and the Resolene both kind of foam up when you're working over a textured surface like this pattern is. So I kind of futz around here and get this foam out of these crevices here. I'm not sure it really matters because if you left that on a smooth surface, you'd see like those little bubbles when it goes away. But since this is going to be antiqued, I'm not sure that it really matters that much. But my mild OCD, it bothers me at this point. So I have to try to futz with it here and get it cleaned up some. You can definitely see the richer color, and probably what most people would associate with a natural VegTan look to this Hermann Oak. This one's Hermann Oak, and the other one is the MTL Leather. The thing that I have a lot of people that I've seen other people's opinions on, needing to have the Hermann Oak, and I think some of it has to do with what you have a tendency to do. The majority of my belts are dyed a particular color. They're not natural. And as a result of that, as long as the leather, dyes nicely, I don't think it's as big of a deal. But if you were to create mostly, natural leather products, I can see where, you might like the color, and I do, of the Hermann Oak as opposed to the other. And it's not like it's a horrible color, but this has got a nice warm color. I will say I got yet another test to do. If I lay that in the sun, because it'll yellow up in the sun, will it get to that color? I guess that's another test for another day. I have enough variables going with this test without adding that to it. But I can probably just cut some scraps and lay that in the sun and see how they react. All right, I'm gonna set these over here, probably let this dry. I might put the antiquing on at the end of the day. It's morning time here, about 8 in the morning, and maybe that'll be a project for this evening before I close up shop for the day, to go ahead and put antique paste on both of these, and I'll do them. I've been trying to do it exactly the same. There's a lot of tooling here. The 4 panels, it takes me about 2.5 hours to create this tool design on here. A lot of tap, tap, tap there. All right, let's come back a little later when we're putting on antique paste, and I'm waiting to put the final finishes on the other pieces. I'll kind of do that all at the same time, and then we can start really comparing what the end result is. I'd better start over with my spiel here. I didn't realize I had a radio going on in the background. YouTube will get me for using someone's music without their approval. So I'm using this Duff's leather dressing here. These 2 panels are the panels that had been tooled and then let dry and then oil, and then the oil's been on there for, I guess at this point, I got to think about when I oiled them. I guess about 24 hours. And I'm just working some of this Duff's product in. It's the leather dressing. And I guess I could do it with a glove on. It just doesn't seem the same. It's all natural, right? It's got to be good for you. I can tell you there's some things that are natural that aren't good for you. But I'm assuming that this Duff's product's good. If someone's got some experience with it, let me know what your experience has been. So that's that one. This is it before the Duff's. We'll see how much it darkens up with the Duff's. And I think I said earlier, I've had natural VegTan before that I wanted darker, and I laid it out in the sun for a few hours and darkened it up. So I feel confident I could get this one about that same darkness over there, but I'm not doing that at this point. We're trying to see the difference in the 2 leathers all the way through the process, each step of it. When the antiquing is dry, on the two other panels. I intend to give them a good buffing again. With this texture like this, that antiquing really gets down in there. And I don't want to leave too much on there because I'm afraid that when you start flexing it like this, it'll start potentially coming out of these deeper areas. As a matter of fact, I've got a special treatment that I do to it. And I'll show you. I do it before I put the clear on. And then I usually do it a little bit after the first coat of clear because I usually put 2 coats on there. I guess I'm concerned about someone getting caught in a rainstorm using the journal like I've seen people do, like a books over your head, and then having the antique on it soften up. That's the reason why I use Resolene instead of tan coat, because the tan coat, I've not experienced it, but I've been told that it can get funky whenever it's gotten wet. So I've got it on this one now. I'll go back to this other one here. It'll just take me about 2 or 3 minutes, and I will be done with putting it on both of these. And I know there's people out there already saying, see, that Herman Oak's got a nice color to it. I do think it has a nice color. And part of it I thought I would cover when I do the recap, but I'll talk a little bit about it here, while I'm putting this on here. But I rarely do the leather natural. I tend to use a dye on the majority of it. Let me set this out of the way. I'll put a little bit more on the other one, and then we'll let that dry, and I'll come back tomorrow probably, because that's about when I'll be ready to put the clears on the antique finish. So what I'm going to do is I'll do a final burnish here with terry rag on here, and then we need to put the Resolene on and let that dry. And I like to use Resolene on this. I worry about it getting caught in the rainstorm, getting wet, and then someone setting it on the front seat of their car and having color transfer, which I think is more likely to happen with tan coat, since you can oil through it. That allows stuff to penetrate through it. And the Resolene, I don't think allows that nearly to that magnitude. So I'm going to put the Resolene on here. Let me set up and I'll get that started. First, a final buffing. Yesterday when I completed the antiquing on here, I wiped it down, and I get pretty aggressive on this because I want to make sure I get any of the extra antiquing out of these cracks, because this is going to get flexed, and if there's any in those cracks, it could come out more than if it was like a surface that wasn't going to have that happen. And I had buffed it down a little bit with the terry rag after I got it all wiped off yesterday, but just one kind of final time across here. And part of that's for me, it helps keep my Resolene tub cleaner if I get some of that off of there. So I promised I was going to show you the special treatment that I do to these. Let me show you here. So I'm going to roll this a little bit, like you would when when you're installing it in there. So, and then here where this seam is going to be, or the hinge point of the cover, I'll get it good that way, and I'll come back here a little bit, roll it there, roll it here, and then when I'm done doing all that, I do this to make sure if there's any loose in there that I get it out of there. That's my special treatment. Someone's probably going to say, you do that to your tooled covers? Yeah, I'd rather deal with any potential buildup of antique paste down in these cracks on my workbench instead of later. And I'll actually do that again after the first coat of Resolene. I'll put Resolene on here, this complete deal, one coat, and then I'll go through, I'll attach my leather here that makes up the pockets for the book that's going to be in this. This is going to be a journal in this one. And then once I get all that done, then I'll come back. I'll do Resolene again. I'll use Resolene here on this inside here and slick that down. All you're going to see is that much, but when the journal's in there, all you'll see is like a little edge here and here. So let me go ahead now. We'll get the Resolene on there. That's my special treatment of the day. It's also a good place to work out any frustrations you might have as well. These edges, I make sure that I've got them even. Sometimes it's at, I don't know, blotchy's the right word, but if I get any blotchiness here, this Resolene tends to, soften some of that back up, and that's an opportunity for me to, I guess, clean that up. So. And I tell people, don't judge the finished project by how it looks at different stages, because sometimes with antiquing, dyeing, if you do leather work, you know where I'm coming from. You can get some kind of different looks there. So I'm just trying to wipe some of this foam out of these groove lines here. And after that, this one's done. I'll set it aside over here, and we'll let it dry. This is the Herman Oak. Sure if my lighting in here is right or not, but it kind of gives you an idea of the two of them. I hope you've enjoyed following along today. I've created those 4 panels to make journal covers, and I really appreciate Montana Leather reaching out, providing the leather to do those 2 tests. And I'll show them here in just a second, but I just wanted to convey that. I've got some other comparison videos coming up. I've got contact adhesives. We're going to test this same leather doing edge burnishing to see, do we see anything different there. I know that whenever you're shopping for leather, it can be a challenge to decide, what should I buy? Do I spend the money on Herman Oak? Will this other leather work? And I think this test today really helps to maybe at least give you some practical examples from leather to leather, because when you're standing in the shop and then you decide to buy one, you make the project from that leather. Maybe you're always wondering, how would it look different the other way? So this is a completed journal here. I thought maybe you'd enjoy seeing what it looks like when it's finished. On these, I stuck with just creating the panels here. So, it's got the same effect other than, stitching along the edges and such. So first I'll show you the panels here. Let me get around behind here so I can make sure we got a good view of that. So these are the 2 tooled and oiled. So I tooled it, I let it dry, I oiled it, I let that soak in. I put a resist on it, and then I put black antiquing on here. So here's the Herman Oak. You can see it's got more of a golden tone in the background. I wonder if I had, instead of using black antiquing on there, if I'd used the dark brown, how that would have affected this one. It's got a little bit of a gray tone to it. I think the whole idea of which one tools better, I think the actual tooling themselves, the way it takes the pattern, the effort to do the tooling, I'm going to say I could really see, I couldn't really note any differences between the two of them. So I guess it comes down to, you know, what do you like? And you could change the appearance, you know, obviously by dyes. And if I wanted to, I could have dyed this in like golden brown and gone that route there. But I wanted to leave dyes out of it because the dyes, I think, could, you know, further mask any differences there. So as a positive or a negative, however you want to look at that. And I said earlier on the video that the majority of the project I do, I end up dyeing them, especially belts are my favorite to make. And I make a few natural VegTan belts, but most of them I make are dyed. And I don't know, maybe if I was buying the Herman Oak, maybe I would do more that are the natural color. I just finished a belt this previous Wednesday. If you didn't see that video, go back and watch that. But that's a tooled and oiled, and I did end up, after I oiled it and put the clear finishes on it, I went ahead and ended up putting tan coat on it, because I think having that clear protection of tan coat and Resolene, those types of items, I think they help keep the belt cleaner and make it possible to wipe it off and maybe more stain resistant. So those are those two there. And then here are the two here that are natural. And these are, I'll just real quickly, I obviously did the tooling. I oiled them with the Phoebe's Neat's Foot oil, and then I put the Duff's leather dressing on top, which is kind of a semi-paste. That's all that's on these. And the one thing I would say, I don't know if I put more of that Duff's on there. This has a little more of a waxy feel than the Herman Oak does. But if I laid it out in the sun, but I didn't want to do anything that was a little bit different than the other one here. So as far as the color goes, I think they have the same amount of burnish. Now stick with me there. What I mean by that is the level that it went from light to dark on each of these. The Herman Oak, I do think that if you're going to do all natural, that the Herman Oak seems to be more of a pleasing color, but I don't have a problem with that color. If we take this one out of the equation, I still think that's a pretty journal. And I haven't done the inside yet. I'm going to do a video on that, and that'll be really short. I promise that one will be. But all I'm going to do is once I finish installing that, I'll do the burnish on the edges, and we'll see, does it burnish any differently from one to the next. But I'll probably lay this thing out in the sun for a couple hours. I want to see what it does. It's going to honey that color up quite a bit. So I think it really comes down to, you know, what are you wanting to do? Are you going to do mainly oils and just clear finishes and not dyes and antiques? Then you may like the looks of the Herman Oak better than the MTL Leather. With that said, I think there's another piece of the comparison, the price per square foot. This is retail. I looked up, and today anyway, this was $4.95 a square foot, $5 a square foot. This was the hide I bought was an entry-level tooling, so it was their lower quality, and it's got more scars, possible stains to work around at $8.50 a square foot. And then you know, more clean looking, you know, AB is like $14.50 a square foot. So $5 to either $8.50 or, you know, $14, $15 a square foot. I guess at the end of the day, it really comes down to, I know it can be a sticker shock to buy a hide, a complete side, and look at the difference in the cost of that. When you look at this project, I should have figured up the square feet. There's probably like 1.5 or 1.25 square feet for each one of these. So really, I think maybe it comes down to just which one you like as the end result. What I mean by that is, yeah, you've got, say, $6 here or $17 here, and that is a big differential between the two of them. But with that said, we're talking only about, you know, $17 in leather to make the journal. So that's, you know, not the end of the world either. Anyway, I think the results speak for themselves. You have to decide what it is that you like. And just as a reminder again, here's these here as well. So I'll get these finished up and I'll have some more journals to display in my booth. It'll be interesting to see, what sells first out of these. Do I price them the same, or do I price the Herman Oak higher than the MTL leather? Obviously that could affect which way it goes as well. I do want to thank Montana Leather again. Pat's been really good to work with. Sent me the leather, and it was fun to do these videos, and I've got more of them coming. Like I said, I've got more comparisons. We have some oil comparisons to do. I'm really interested to try this pitch blend. I don't know if someone's got an opinion on that, or if they've used it. The pitch blend oil for leather, and it's got a little more yellow to it. So I'm really wondering if I use that on the MTL color, will that make it closer to there? Yet another video comparison there. Put in your comments, do you like this type of a video? I know it maybe it's long, but there's a couple spots in there, like when I was oiling it, I wanted to clearly show that I didn't do anything different between one and the other. I think obviously if it's a yellow or oil, there's a good chance it would provide a yellower finish on that, and that may close the gap on it. If you haven't tried to make any of these journal covers, I'll put a link at the end of the video of my whole building of the journal cover video I've got out there, and I think you probably enjoy the process. They make just really beautiful gifts here, and I put my maker's mark on the back side there. So I've kicked this around enough. I appreciate you taking time to be with me in the video today. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I do hope that you have a great day.